Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to our second event of 2021, Seamless Payments for E-Commerce Success. I'm Adina Fisher, and I'm co-chair of the Sponsorship Committee. Many of you are probably familiar with our organization, but for those of you who are new, welcome to New York City Fintech Women. We are very passionate about our mission, which is connecting, promoting, and empowering women in their professional advancement in fintech. We are a community of over 5,000 members, not just in New York, but nationally and now internationally. Due to the pandemic, we've pivoted to virtual events, and we've now featured topics and events that are relevant to fintech. We are always looking for feedback on how to support you, whether it's career goals, or professional goals, or sponsorship goals, networking, or anything else. If you are not a member yet, feel free to sign up at nycfintechwomen.com. With that being said, I'm very excited to introduce you to the event today. This event would not be possible without our sponsorship at Adyen. Thank you for your continuous support. I'll now hand it over to our moderator, Sasha Pelch, who's the co-founder of NYC Fintech Women.
Thanks so much, Adina. Everyone, welcome to our event. As Adina explained, this wouldn't be possible without our sponsor, Adyen, so a huge thank you to them. And if there are any women in the audience today that are looking for a new role, Adyen are actually hiring quite a lot of roles, 3 in particular that I'm going to mention. So an account manager in New York, a senior channel partnership manager in New York, and a marketing director in San Francisco. So now I'd love to introduce our panelists from Affirm, Adyen, and Kendra Scott. So over to you, Stacey, to intro yourself, please.
Hi, thanks, Sasha, and thanks for having me here today. I'm excited to be here. I'll start off by telling you a little bit about Affirm. For those of you who don't know what Affirm is, we offer people a transparent and flexible alternative to credit cards and the ability to pay for things over time. At Affirm, I work on our client success team where I oversee our travel and fashion verticals. And I'm based in New York.
Great. And now Sophia from Adyen.
Great, thanks, Sasha. And thank you all for joining us today. So my name's Sophia Goldberg. I'm on the product growth team at Adyen, and I focus on some of our e-commerce optimization and tokenization products. And a little about what Adyen is we're the payments platform of choice for some of the world's largest and most innovative companies. And we handle both online and in-store payments. We're an acquirer, processor in dozens of companies, or in dozens of countries, sorry, for both card and non-card payment methods.
Okay, and Michelle from Kendra Scott.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Hello from San Antonio, Texas. I'm with Kendra Scott. We are a fashion jewelry brand in the market for quality styles at very affordable prices. Our pillars are family and fashion and philanthropy. My role at Kendra Scott is Director of E-commerce Operations. I have a whole team of developers, quality assurance people, project managers, operations people. We basically are responsible for delivering the roadmap on a yearly basis.
Great. And actually all of the panelists today are wearing pieces from Kendra Scott jewelry. So you can see Stacey's necklace there, and Sophia's hoops, and Michelle is just dripping in Kendra Scott as well. One other thing I did want to note is that we had in the advertisement that Roberto was going to be moderating. Unfortunately, due to a technical issue, he wasn't able to join today. But if anyone wants to know about SellersFunding, so his company helps smaller businesses fund their e-commerce activity, and I'd be happy to intro anyone to him after this if they would like to learn more. Okay, so let's kick it off with Stacey from Affirm. So at Affirm, you're focused on fashion and travel, And these are two industries that have somewhat been very affected by COVID. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that has panned out and what's happening in the future.
Sure. So we did see that travel in particular was devastated last spring when the pandemic first hit. But we've seen some important recovery trends emerge since then. So on the merchant side, we've seen heightened activity from merchants who realized that Affirm is key to the recovery efforts. Our sales team has been busy signing new partners like American Airlines, Picasso, which we just announced yesterday, and Icon Pass. And existing merchants have increasingly leveraged Affirm on their websites and in their marketing channels. And then on the consumer side, we have seen demand start to pick up, and we expect that to continue as vaccines continue to roll out and people become more optimistic about booking trips into the future. In a survey we conducted late last year, nearly half of respondents said they're shifting spending in 2021 more towards travel to be able to take that trip, that much awaited vacation that all of us have put on hold. And then on the fashion side, we saw a less dramatic dip in sales. That's due in part to the fact that sales have shifted from in-store to online. Nordstrom, for example, one of our largest fashion retailers, saw more than half of its sales come through e-commerce, which is a huge change from before the pandemic.
Oh, do you kind of have a ballpark of what it was before the pandemic? That's interesting.
Yeah, it was more 40-60, 30-70. And so the fact that it's merged towards half and is continuing to, lean into online rather than in store is really a big shift. And, I think Nordstrom has responded to that by flexing the way that it does business. So for example, it has really emphasized buy online and pickups in store and buy online and return in store, which are, two new innovations that, again, were born out of the pandemic, but are probably here to stay.
Awesome. Okay, so now switching over to Sophia from Adyen. Are there any particular industries like fashion and travel, etc., that you focus on?
Remember to unmute myself. So we don't actually have specific vertical focuses at Adyen. We support merchants really across a wide range of verticals. A lot of retail and travel merchants, technology, streaming services, airlines, hospitality, QSR. So really broad and a pretty flexible product depending on merchants' different vertical needs.
Awesome. And just so the audience gets an idea of like some of the brand names that they may know, do you have any that come to mind? I know I've seen on your website like Tiffany & Co. and Gap. Any others?
Yeah, so a lot of the big retail names like that. And in the technology space, merchants like Microsoft and the like. So really broad.
Awesome. Okay, so now switching gears a little bit. So a question for you, Michelle. So Kendra Scott is a consumer brand. This is the type of brand that FinTechs like Adyen and Affirm support. So what are some of the changes that you have made over the years to your e-commerce environment that has ensured a more user-friendly payment flow? Oh, I think you're on mute still, Michelle. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the theme of 2021. Oops, I'm on mute. Sorry. And 2020, I guess. So one of the things we've done is launch some quick pay options so that the user can get through that checkout funnel faster. We have things like Affirm, which Stacey has talked about a little bit, to allow our customers to pay over time. We have border free for our international customers, which charges them their taxes and duties up front. So by the time they get their package, there's no surprises. So that's been really good for us. And all of these have really helped this year in particular with COVID, as all of our traditional in-store shoppers have really transitioned to online customers.
Awesome. And you mentioned borderless and the charging the fees up front. I think that's excellent because there's nothing worse than getting hit with a huge amount of fees after you've made the purchase. What parts of the world do you send to?
Pretty much anywhere, but some Asian markets.
Okay, so Australia, I could buy it for my mum's Mother's Day.
Totally can.
Okay. It's good to know. Awesome. Okay, so now here's a question for all of you. What are the new trends in e-commerce? What's going to blow our minds next? So I'll hand it over to Michelle to start.
I wouldn't even call it next. I would say now. I would say anything artificial intelligence related. Kendra Scott launched last year a virtual try-on feature for just our earrings. It was a huge hit, and we're actually going to expand on that a little bit more, as well as some other artificial intelligence stuff with search that's coming up in 2021.
Cool. So being like really relevant to like what people will like and showing them relevant options, like that kind of tailoring.
Yes. So it brings in data, like it brings in data so that you can target the search to what is really trending across the industry and not just with Kendra Scott.
Oh, okay. So like macro trends.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So now moving over to Stacey. Do you have any trends that you're excited about?
Sure. At the risk of sounding a little self-serving, I will flag alternative payment methods. I think the buy now, pay later space is experiencing explosive growth. It's expected to triple its market share in North America over the next 3 years. And this is due to the proliferation of, generally online commerce, but also younger generations like millennials and Gen Z looking for alternative payment methods. So we're obviously excited about that.
Yeah, there's so many providers now, and like later on we'll talk about the differences between them, but yeah, it's definitely a booming market. And what about you, Sophia?
Yeah, so I think piggybacking on what Stacey said, definitely installments and buy now, pay later becoming more and more ubiquitous. But on top of that, I think subscription models will just continue to explode. And this makes a lot of sense for merchants because they result in lifetime values of customers that are 6 times longer than single purchase models. And some studies have shown that actually by 2023, 75% of organizations will sell subscription services for any direct to consumer products. So I think, subscriptions will really just see to blossom, and the products and technologies that support that shift. So things like network tokenization, for example, will be more important and more widely adopted.
Now that you mentioned that, I am realizing that I've been seeing so many of these now. So is this a correct example? Like, let's say I wanted to buy Pros, that new tailored shampoo and conditioner brand, and that asks me, do you want to get this every month? And
Exactly.
receive. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
It definitely does make sense. And I've seen so many of those these days. Okay. So next, let's talk about both Affirm and Adyen. I don't know if the audience have seen this, but there was a large announcement of a partnership between these two companies. So I'd love for Sophia and Stacey to provide an example about how this partnership has helped a client in particular.
Sure, I can kick it off. I think generally speaking, the partnership is really critical and important to Affirm, both for online and for in-store commerce. So online, it means that for new merchant partners who use Adyen, there's no work required to integrate Affirm. Merchants can just enable Affirm as a payment method. And so that makes it easy for merchants like Alice and Olivia and Bugaboo in particular to turn on Affirm quickly and seamlessly. And then on the in-store side, it makes for very frictionless checkout for consumers. So they just need to scan a QR code, choose their loan terms, and then that information and their preferences are seamlessly passed through. And so it just makes checkout really super quick and painless. And we see that in practice at Kate Spade stores.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I agree with everything Stacey said. But really on top of that, buy now, pay later methods, exactly like Affirm and some of the other partners we work with, really allow merchants to provide flexibility to their shoppers, especially for example, larger ticket purchases like Bugaboo or really high-end strollers. But I think the other part that we see from the merchant perspective is that it bears the complexity and the cost of financing those installment plans, which has been, a barrier to offering that shopper flexibility in the past. So you can, both rescue large ticket sales, but also reach an entirely new group of customers. And then a little bit on, what Adyen and Affirm have built together is we don't dictate what the merchant can offer in terms of installments or basket size or things like that. We've really built flexible integrations together to allow merchants with various different use cases, from retail to travel, things like that, to best reach their shoppers.
And I think the Bugaboo pram example is like a great one, because that is such a big ticket item and so expensive. So being able to split that across is definitely going to help a lot of parents, like when they're making an investment in such a product like that. We do have a few questions in the chat, so I'm just going to ask one of those now. So this one says, how has data privacy and security impacted your businesses with the shift to everything being online now? So maybe starting with Michelle for that one, if you have anything to talk about that.
I mean, well, first of all, all the credit card information is tokenized or encrypted, for lack of a better word. So, I mean, really not a lot has changed from what we were doing in the past in that. I mean, it's just more traffic that's coming through the system is what I would say. So more the shift to online has more been a measure for us for making sure we can handle the traffic from a load perspective.
Mm-hmm. Good problem to have.
It is a good problem to have.
Okay.
I'm happy to hop in also. I think Michelle's right that for any players that have already been in e-commerce, that doesn't really change. But where we've seen a shift to everything being online is for merchants who relied on like call centers or customer service reps taking payments over the phone. And now they're at home on their home phones, and that's no longer as secure of an environment. So finding out ways to solve for that. So we have something called Pay by Link, which is a link that they can send out to a customer or things like that, as ways that we've had to really quickly be scrappy to help support those merchant use cases that just don't work on a fully online work from home type scenario.
Yeah, that's a great point, and like something that has been born out of COVID that didn't exist before. So it's good that you're able to address it. And anything from you, Stacey, or you happy to move on?
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add on top of that. I think, we've always, again, nothing has changed much for Affirm either. We've always dealt with really sensitive information, and so have, firm guardrails around that, and continue to do that.
Okay, awesome. So Adyen and Affirm and Kendra Scott, you're all dealing with larger enterprises, e-commerce situations. Kendra Scott is a big consumer brand, but do you have any advice, Michelle, for a smaller brand about what they could do to enhance their e-commerce presence without maybe the scale and the resources that you're lucky enough to have?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I started out at Kendra Scott when we only had 12 stores. So we have over 100 now. So what I've learned through those 8 years of being in Kendra Scott is you have to keep things simple. The more simple, the better. Be agile and don't be afraid to take risk. You also have to be willing to wear many hats and just dive in to get the job done.
That's awesome advice. And I definitely agree with keeping things simple. Like in a fast-paced startup environment, it can get like very overwhelming and, millions of things on the plate. So that's really good advice. And congrats on going from 12 stores to over 100. And your company is just becoming more and more well-known. So I watched your female CEO, Kendra Scott herself, on Shark Tank on Friday evening. So that's really exciting. Okay, so now another question for Stacey. So, we mentioned earlier that the buy now, pay later space is really blowing up. And there's like so many players out there like Bread, Klarna, Afterpay. So I'd love to hear how you differentiate from those.
Sure. I'll anchor on 3 key differentiators that Affirm has. The first is that we're the only buy now, pay later provider to not charge fees of any kind to the customer. which is in line with our core mission of being transparent about how we work. So customers always know exactly what they need to pay, and that amount never changes. The second is our network effect. So we partner with leading brands across industries, including lifestyle, fashion and beauty, travel, big box, and others. And this creates a vast network that becomes a powerful customer acquisition engine for our merchants. And then number three is just the breadth of our product set. So we enable repayment terms from 6 weeks to up to 48 months. And that gives immense flexibility to merchants and consumers alike.
Okay, awesome. And so you mentioned no fees. Are there other ones charging fees, like when people are late, or like, and what happens in that situation with Affirm?
Yeah, we don't charge late fees of any kind. We never have. We have no intention of doing so. And within our competitive landscape, there are some installment providers who do charge either late fees or penalties of another sort, or an origination fee, or what have you. So it differs by provider.
Okay, awesome. And now Sophia, so maybe a little bit less known for our audience, considering the buy now, pay later space is consumer facing, so they're all aware of those brands. But what about from your side? So some of your competitors like PayPal, Braintree, checkout.com, how do you differentiate from those?
Yeah, so I really like to think about us as differentiating in two ways. One is our platform itself. So we have a truly single platform. We've built everything in-house, not through acquisition or third parties. So from an integration and growth perspective for merchants, it's a single integration, single connection for cards, non-cards, our risk product, which has a lot of operational and technical scalability value add. Whether you're accepting payments with us in the US or Brazil or Hong Kong. But the second piece of it is really performance. So in large part enabled by that single platform and our direct integrations into the card networks there's a cohesion of data. And so there's an ability for us to use that data to build optimized solutions for merchants. So ways to eke out additional auth rate, which in turn is very real revenue for merchants.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about an additional auth rate and what that means, just for the education of our audience?
Yeah. So, I mean, all of your teams, if you're working in e-commerce, have worked really hard on building a great product. Your marketing teams are driving people to the store. Your e-commerce team has built like a really fantastic customer experience flow through the checkout and the buy button. And so the worst thing to happen is you get 100 people through that funnel, and then the card network denies that transaction. And so we work in different ways, things like, which network do we send a dual branded card to? Like debit cards in the US all have, Visa, MasterCard, but also the PIN debit networks. And so choosing who we send that transaction to can have a really real impact on how many transactions end up as authorized.
So there's a lot happening behind the scenes that we don't even know about when we swipe our cards every time.
There's a lot going on behind the scenes, a lot of complexity. It's a lot of technical messages, which means that there's also, really broad ways that different issuers look at transactions. So we just try and figure out ways to optimize that for our merchants.
Great. That's actually a really good segue to another question that we had in the chat, which is around how someone can break into the e-commerce or fintech payments space. So, you just alluded to the fact that there's just the tip of the iceberg is what we see, and then there's a lot below it. So any advice that you could give someone that may be looking to, move their career into a similar role to what you have or other people in payments?
Yeah. So, payments is a really hot topic these days, but it's also a really new industry in a lot of ways, especially for online payments. So I would say you're not behind if you don't know much yet. There's a lot of great resources to learn online, networking events like this, webinars, NYC Fintech Women does lots of great events as well, other ones than this. And I would say, don't be scared of joining an organization where you're just open to learning. And that's typically what we look for when we hire at Adyen is, do you have a curiosity, a hunger to learn? Because, payments is a small industry. It's very complex. So we don't expect people to know everything or necessarily know much when they join us.
Okay, that's really promising to hear. So All the women and male allies that are on the line right now, don't be afraid to put your hat in the ring and learn on the job, for sure. Okay, what about from you, Michelle, in terms of people getting into e-commerce that have not worked in e-commerce before?
I really love what she just said, by the way, and that's almost my answer exactly. I wrote for this question, don't be single threaded, and it ties into exactly what she said. When I started my job at Kendra Scott, I had zero e-commerce experience. I actually had experience doing birth and death systems, real boring. So jewelry was a great, a great industry for me to get into. And again, we had 10 or 12 stores, and now we have over 100. We've launched buy online, pick up in store, buy online, ship from store, all kinds of things that I knew I didn't know what most of the initials meant in the e-commerce world. And I've been able to learn because I started at the ground from retail all the way up to e-commerce, and it's allowed me not to be single threaded. So it's opened up a lot of opportunity and growth. So if you are that kind of person that likes to dive in and learn, I say go for it.
And Michelle, what are some of the e-commerce initials or acronyms that you've learned?
So OMS stands for Order Management System, WMS, Warehouse Management System. ERP. Stacey could probably help me with some more, but yeah, there's many. And then, there's also systems that have 3 or 4 different acronyms for the same system. So there's always that.
Perfect. That's good to know. So no one's going to be afraid when they hear those in an interview or anything like that.
I start the first day with every new employee going through acronyms. That's one of the tasks that I do on the first day.
Perfect. And Stacey, any advice that you have to offer the attendees?
Yeah, I love both of those answers as well. I'm a perfect use case for that. When I joined Affirm, I was new to FinTech. I was actually new to client success too. And my road to Affirm was hearing our CEO, Max Levchin, speak at a travel conference, which I was attending in a completely different life, as part of a completely different life when I was working for a travel company. And he gave one of the keynotes at this conference, and I heard him talk about Affirm. I hadn't heard about it before, but I was really enamored with what he said. And so I looked up the company afterwards. I didn't know about Affirm. And I decided that I was really supportive of its mission, really intrigued by what it was doing, and went ahead and actually emailed him. And I was lucky enough to get a response, and then I went ahead and formally applied for the job and was lucky enough to get it. But I would say don't be afraid to take a chance. And again, to Sophia and Michelle's points, like you don't need to have experience to enter this space. I think I always appreciate the person who shows passion for a role that I might be interviewing for. That always shines through and means a lot. And so I think, just feel free to go ahead and take a chance.
That is so amazing that you emailed Max Levchin. Like he's, a celebrity in our industry. First of all, like, how did you get his email address? And do you remember what the email said? Just for, those people out there that want to get a response.
Yeah. So the actual story was I heard him speak and I didn't know who he was at the time. And so when he was done speaking, I approached him and had a conversation with him. Had I known at the time who Max Levchin was, I don't know that I would have had the courage to do that, but he's a lovely person. And so we chatted for a few minutes and I got his information and then was bold enough to send him an email. And he was, again, lovely enough to respond.
That's so awesome. Like he's a busy guy. So
he's a busy guy.
Yeah, for those of you in the audience who don't know who he is, he co-founded PayPal. He also is like an early investor in the likes of Yelp. Anything else I'm missing, Stacey, of like his, why he's famous?
Yeah, mostly for founding PayPal. I think he's had a hand in a number of very large companies, that some of which you named, Yelp, Evernote is another one. Back when I did this, it was a few years ago. So not that he wasn't busy then, but he's super busy, certainly super busy now.
Yeah, sounds like a great CEO. So you're really lucky to work with someone as smart and friendly as that. Okay, great. So I'm going to have another question from the chat now. So are there any podcast series or books that you love? We can start with Sophia.
Yeah, I'll keep it fintech focused.
Let's do both. You can do fintech focus and then fun as well.
I would say, I mean, especially for people interested in payments, I'd say payment systems in the US is kind of the Bible of starting to learn about who are the different players in the space. It's definitely a lot to get through, but it is basically a textbook of knowledge. So anyone who's curious about the space, either from, you're working on the e-commerce side or you're working on the payments processor side, I think that's a really great book for people to pick up.
Okay, awesome. And then any favorite book that you just like? If you don't have one, we can come back to you.
I don't have anything off the top of my head.
And Stacey?
I think I'm going to have to pass on this question. I used to commute and that was my time to listen to podcasts. And now that I don't commute, I don't know where that time has gone, but I used to be an avid listener of The Daily, which has nothing to do with payments, but was a good source of news.
Yeah, exactly. My commute has just changed from me going from the bedroom to the dining room table. So I totally miss the commute podcast as well. And Michelle, anything from you?
I actually pulled this out because I keep it in it's insanely simple. The Obsession That Drives Apple's Success. I refer to this book often. I have highlights all throughout it. So I strongly recommend that read.
Oh, amazing. Okay. That's a very practical, awesome tip. Thank you very much. And any of your personal favorites? No worries if this was a question from the chat, so I didn't give you much time to prepare.
Nope.
Someone wrote in the chat that FS11 is a good fintech podcast to listen to. I agree with that. Fintech Insider. They're based out of London, but also cover globally all of the fintech news and trends. And Talk of Her Town, which is New York City Fintech Women's new podcast. So we recently invested in podcast equipment, and Nicole Newland, who's on our board, has done 3 podcasts now, I think. And so if you have a chance to listen to them, please do. We're really trying to profile more women in the industry and to help get more visibility on them as professional women. Okay.
I thought of another podcast also by Glenn Brook, who wrote the payments book. It's called Payments on Fire.
Okay.
I've only listened to a few episodes, but really great breadth of topics they cover.
Awesome. Okay, great. And then we have a question on crypto. So again, this is from the chat. So if the panelists don't have anything, that's totally fine. But the question is, could you talk about the future of taking payments in Bitcoin or other cryptos? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've got some thoughts. So Adyen actually accepted Bitcoin years ago. In the early days, and not a single merchant, I think, integrated or used it. So we deprecated it from the platform. So I think that's like a quirky part of Adyen history that not a lot of people know. And then I think for the future, everything we build is based on merchant interest and demand. Currently, something like Bitcoin is a lot more volatile than a lot of merchants want for payments acceptance. Also thinking about, how they transact and get that out into funds that their finance team is comfortable with. So never say never, but probably not for right now.
Okay, that's really interesting. I had no idea that they had launched it and then no one used it, deprecated it, but Adyen's ahead of their time. It's great. And anything from the others about crypto, no problem if not. Okay, awesome. Some other podcasts that have been recommended in the chat. So thank you very much, Elizaveta. So FinTech Today does a podcast, and Warden FinTech podcast is another good one too. And someone else is mentioning that they joined Clubhouse recently. So that's definitely all the rage. I'm seeing it everywhere. So we're, as New York City Fintech Women, are also joining Clubhouse too. Okay, so we're nearly at time. I just want to open it up to the panelists in case they have any final things that they'd like to share, particularly about your careers from leaving university to where you are now. If there's any key stories that you could tell, that would be awesome. So we can start with Stacey.
Sure. I've actually had a fairly unusual career path. I've worked in travel a bunch and weddings. I ran marketing for Max Brenner, which for those of you who live in New York, you're probably familiar with it. It's a chocolate restaurant / boutique in the Union Square area. And I think the general theme throughout my career has been working for companies that I am interested in and believe in, which sounds really simple, but I think at the end of the day, you know, we all spend so much time working. You really should like what you do. And so I've tried to make that part of my professional mission, and I've continued that certainly now at Affirm.
Awesome. I love Max Brenner. Delicious, dangerous though.
I miss it.
Okay. Anything from you, Michelle, about your career? Like, I've seen that you've been very active in fitness and in local government, so it'd be awesome to hear about that.
Yeah, and I actually, I started out kind of in the IT world right out of college and worked until I had really premature twins and warranted me staying home with them. And during that time, I got into group fitness, more of a stress reliever than anything. And because it was free babysitting if I was teaching the class. So that's really how that happened. I then got into city government, more of a way to like keep my interpersonal skills and be able to talk to adults and be able to kind of stay fresh, because I did want to eventually go back to work once they were, you know, in elementary school or later. So I actually ended up coming out from a class at the gym, and someone from Kendra Scott stopped me in the parking lot, a person I had worked with, and wanted me to do a 6 to 8 week project for Kendra Scott for a mobile project they had going on. I said, sure. When would you like me to start? And they said tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And that was 8 years ago. So I have grown into my role. I started out as a part-time QA person at Kendra Scott. So
that's awesome. And such a great thing to do, like multitasking, 2 birds with 1 stone, getting fit and having babysitting at once. I think that's like an awesome way to look at it. Being too busy, you can.
And I like to tell that because I hear that a lot from stay-at-home moms, people who leave the workforce for some reason to stay home with kids, and it's all a personal choice, right? But a lot of people are really interested in how do you get back into it, and so I like to just give the advice to just stay as current as you can. You can still learn even if you're staying home with kids. It's a little harder, but you can still keep your skills honed. And that's my advice to people. It can be done. And I have heard 2 or 3 stay-at-home moms coming back into the workforce, and they've worked out great. So
amazing. That's what we love to hear. That's great. Okay. And anything from you, Sophia?
Yeah, I mean, those were, great stories, both Stacey and Michelle. So thank you for sharing. So, I mean, I didn't come from payments before Adyen. I was just generally, there's a pop-up.
And don't worry about it.
An economics nerd who loved what, I called the mechanism of global trade. So things like freight shipping, now payments. But my background was in policy more, and I worked in Parliament in the UK, and I worked on the Clinton campaign in the US. And I was coming out of grad school in London during Brexit. And so it was kind of this, do I want to stay in politics? Is there a way for me to even stay in the UK and get a visa? And so I started looking into, I'd heard about FinTech, but started looking into it and quickly found payments and found Adyen. Similar to Stacey, I sent a cold email of just, hey, I want to learn more. And the rest kind of became history, because I really like doing things where I'm constantly learning and that are really social. And payments, and especially my experience at Adyen has really fit that.
So you sent the cold email to Adyen, or was it?
Yeah, to someone who was a head of growth and an early Adyener at the time.
Yeah, I feel like that's amazing advice. I mean, that's how I got my chance in the USA. Like I didn't know anyone, came to this country, and then cold called the woman that ended up becoming my boss. So I think like if you just hustle and like, not think too much about the worst case or like what they're going to think of you, like, who cares at the end of the day? If they don't want to answer you, they'll just delete your email or not take your phone call. But it's definitely worth a shot, and you can change industries because of it, or change countries.
I've gotten 3 jobs in different industries from that. So I joined leanin.org in the early days after reading the book, just with a cold email. Then I moved into consulting just with an email. So anyone considering that, I would just say, make it a bit personalized, show why you're excited about that organization or company. And typically when I see those come through my email, I'm more than happy to respond or chat.
Awesome. Very impressive that you got your foot in the door with Lean In, because that was such a huge hype. And so I'm sure they got millions of emails. So that's amazing that you got the cut through and you got the job. So congrats. You would have seen, all the attendees, a poll that we just did. So if you haven't answered it, please go and answer it. It's just us trying to figure out how we can serve you better. So thank you to the people that explained networking opportunities. Look like the main thing that everyone is asking for. We just had a request for the poll to be resent. Can we do that, Nicole? Okay. I'm just reading at the chat whilst talking. So yeah, it looks like networking opportunities is the winner. So thank you so much to everyone that joined today, and to the panelists as well. Just before we wrap up, I do want to make a note to everyone that Kendra Scott is not only a jewelry provider, but they also are philanthropic. And so they've done a special code for all NYC Fintech Women members. If you purchase something and enter the code giveback-10CR, and I'll put that in the chat and also the thank you email to everyone, 20% of the proceeds will go to our charity of choice, which is Bottomless Closet. So anyone that doesn't know what Bottomless Closet is, it is a charity aimed at women that are low income or living in poverty that want to get into the workforce and get a more highly paid job. So they do things like clothes donations so that women have something nice to wear to an interview, and other skills transfers as well, like resume writing and interview prep and things like that. So if you're looking for something to buy yourself and have a permanent reminder that you've helped other women in need, that's a good option, or buying something for your mum for Mother's Day, something like that. Cool. So I'm just going to get the final slide up, Nicole, if that's all right. Okay, here we go. So just a bit of a recap about what is coming up. I mentioned our podcast, so Talk of Her Town, so feel free to listen to that. Something really exciting for International Women's Day, we are partnering with NASDAQ and UN Women to host an event on March 8th. So some really impressive panelists there, 3 panels in total. One of them has Shivani, the CEO of Tala. We have the CEO of the European Banking Federation, people from Stash, people from other FinTechs. So I'm very, very excited about that event. So you can start to sign up for that now. And then in the spring, we have Finovate that we will be part of. And another huge thank you to Adyen for sponsoring this event. And just a reminder that they are hiring talented women. So if there are attendees or people that you know that could be a good fit, then please reach out to either myself or NYC Fintech Women, or apply directly from the NYC Fintech Women site. And just a reminder, those some of the key jobs that are being advertised right now is an account manager, a marketing director, and a senior channel partnerships manager. Okay, so thank you very much everyone for attending, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on International Women's Day at the NASDAQ UN Women event. Thanks so much.